John slammed his hand on the steering wheel as he drove down the highway, the anger building inside him like a raging inferno. He could not believe what had just happened. He had just been fired from his job, all because of a stupid mistake. He helped his friend to clock in, even though he was absent, and now he was out of a job because of it. He did not understand how things could have turned out this way. He had always been a hard worker and willing to go the extra mile for his colleagues and boss. He had always been ready to help others, even if it meant putting his needs aside. But now, all that kindness had come back to bite him in the ass. He felt used and unappreciated, making him angrier than he could ever remember feeling. Despite these struggles, John refused to change who he was. He believed that being a kind and compassionate person made him happy, and he refused to let the negative experiences of others change that. It had been a tough month for John. He spent the next few weeks applying for jobs, but there were hundreds of other applicants with more experience and better qualifications everywhere he used. John felt discouraged and questioned whether he would ever find a new job. But one day, John received a call from a company he had applied to a few months ago. They were looking for a chief marketing officer and were impressed by John's experience and qualifications. They offered him the job, and John was overjoyed. As John settled into his new position, he quickly realized that a fantastic group of people surrounded him. His colleagues were friendly and supportive and welcomed him to the team with open arms. He quickly made friends with a few of his co-workers, and they often went out for lunch or drinks after work. One of the people he became closest with was a woman named Sarah. She was a marketing manager, and they had been assigned to work on a project together. They quickly discovered they had a lot in common and started spending a lot of time together outside work. Sarah was indeed a sweet and funny girl. She had a contagious laugh and a deep sense of humor that always put John at ease. She was always up for a good laugh and could find humor in even the most mundane situations. John is interested in her and asks her out on a date. They have a wonderful time on their date. They continue to see each other, and their relationship develops over time. They both feel a strong connection and decide to make it official. A year had passed since John began working at the company. He was always a hard worker, willing to help his colleagues when needed. But as time passed, he noticed his co-workers were becoming increasingly demanding. They took advantage of his willingness to always say yes, and often gave him tasks that were not within his job responsibilities. He was becoming more overwhelmed with work that was not his own. He was constantly being pulled away from his tasks to help others, which was starting to affect his productivity. As a result, he may have felt overworked and undervalued, leading to his decision to quit his job. It is possible that his co-workers needed to understand the reasons for John's decision to leave, as they may not have been aware of the extra tasks he was being asked to do. John walked into the bar, feeling a weight lifted off his shoulders. He had just quit his job and was looking forward to relaxing with a cold beer. He found a spot at the bar and ordered a pint, relieved as he took his first sip. As he looked around the bar, he noticed a familiar face sitting at a table in the corner. It was his girlfriend, and she was sitting with another man. John's heart sank as he realized what was happening. He could not believe it. He had just quit his job, and now this. He felt anger and betrayal welling up inside of him as he watched his girlfriend laugh and kissing with the other man. He considered confronting them but decided against it. He did not want to make a scene. John knew it already, he had heard it before, but he was so nice and loyal that he did not want to believe it. But now, seeing it with his own eyes, he could no longer deny the truth. As John walked out of the bar, his girlfriend, Sarah, saw him and immediately rushed after him. "John, wait," she called out, running to catch up to him. John stopped in his tracks and turned to face her, his expression cold and distant. "What do you want, Sarah?" he asked, his voice laced with anger and betrayal. "I know what you saw in there," she said, her voice shaking. "And I'm so sorry. I should have told you earlier, but I did not know how." John felt numb as he listened to her words. "What are you trying to say?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not happy with you anymore," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "You're so nice, and I don't deserve you." John felt a lump form in his throat as he struggled to understand what was happening. He could not believe the woman he loved was leaving him for another man. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I wish things could have been different." She looked at him with tears and whispered, "Me too." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving John alone at the bar with a broken heart. John rushed to his car, tears streaming down his face as he got in. He was so angry and hurt that he could not think straight. He started the car and took off, driving faster and faster as he tried to outrun his pain. As he drove, his anger and hurt turned to blind rage. He did not see the sharp turn in the road until it was too late. He lost control of the car and careened off the road, crashing into a tree. He woke up to the sound of sirens and the feeling of pain all over his body. He was trapped in his car and could feel blood running down his face. He tried to move, but he could not. He was stuck, and he knew he was going to die. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, he heard a voice calling out to him. "Help is here, son. Hang on." John struggled to open his eyes, but when he did, he saw an older man leaning over him, a look of concern on his face. The older man had pulled him out of the car and called for help. John could see the ambulance's flashing lights in the distance, getting closer by the second. "Thank you," John managed to whisper before he lost consciousness again. When John woke up, he found himself in a hospital room. The older man sat in a chair next to his bed. "You're lucky to be alive," the older man said. "I saw the whole thing. You were in a bad way when I found you, but I knew I had to get you out of that car before it was too late." John did not speak back, and Tom assumed he was still in shock. "Okay, don't answer me," Tom said softly. "Take a rest. I'll go now." As Tom stood up to leave, John suddenly spoke up, his voice weak but determined. "Wait," he said. "Can I ask you a question? Is there a problem with being so nice to everybody?" Tom nodded sympathetically. "I know it can be hard, but sometimes you must take a risk to be kind. And sometimes, that risk pays off. Remember that you always have the right to say no, and you should never let anyone make you feel guilty about setting boundaries. But at the same time, do not let fear hold you back from being the best person you can be. The world needs more kindness, and you have the power to make a difference." John smiled, feeling a sense of determination rising within him. "Thanks, Tom. You are right. I'll try to be more mindful of my actions and not let fear hold me back." Just as the old man was getting to the story's climax, they were interrupted by Nina's mother. "It's getting dark, let's go home," she said. Nina's face fell. "But Mom, Grandpa didn't finish the story," she protested. The old man chuckled. "Huh, we didn't notice that it's dark already," he said, and they laughed. Nina sat on the edge of her grandpa's bed, staring down at her hands as she twisted her fingers together. She had been looking forward to hearing more about John, but her grandfather had just told her that he was not feeling well enough to tell the story today. Nina's face turned sad, and she said, "But Grandpa." Sensing Nina's disappointment, the old man reassured her with a smile and said, "It's okay, next week when you visit here, I will tell you all about John and how he met his wife." Nina's face brightened, and she said, "Yes. Bye, Grandpa." Nina's mother smiled at her father and said, "Goodbye, Dad." She hugged her father and said, "See you next week." The old man replied, "Bye to you, my sweet angel." After that, they all went home. Darling? The old man's wife said, where did they go? The old man turned to her and replied, they left a while ago. I saw them pass me by, but I thought someone else was waving at me in the garden. My vision is getting blurry, his wife said. The old man laughed and said, oh, we're getting older. My knees hurt too, darling. His wife put a hand on his shoulder and said, don't worry, next week we'll go to the doctor. The old man smiled and nodded, yes, you're right. I'll make an appointment. They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the night. The old man's wife reached over and took his hand. You want some tea, John? His wife asked. Yes, darling, John replied. And they sat together in companionable silence, watching the garden and the world go by. Thanks for watching. This is just the beginning of your journey to a better you. For more inspiring and informative stories, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, take care and keep growing.